What's up, everyone? Peta Party here. No videos last week. Had a flood in the basement. Not very fun thing to deal with. So today's video, we're going to be going over one of the reasons why I like collecting and investing in cardboard more so than other shit like toys and video games and all that. That really became apparent to me with the problems I had in my basement, and that is that cardboard, even if it's been graded like these, are very, 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 very easy to store compared to something like all of this shit. Um, the size of this, Super Deluxe Mega Collector's Edition Final Fantasy VII Remake compared to a stack of PSA or Beckett's Labs is completely ridiculous. The space it takes for me to try and store, or if I wanted to buy multiples of these, compared to a stack of trading cards, I could literally fit entire registry sets from like the first 4 or 5 sets of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the amount of space it would take me to store one of those. So the space aspect of it is extremely, I'm going to say, cost prohibitive, and that might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but it costs you money to own or rent property. So depending on where you may live, it might be cheaper or more expensive than some other places, but in a lot of retail situations, you'll do up your rent based on the cost per square foot. So, depending on where your area might be, we're going to say however many square feet you got, anywhere from $1 a foot all the way up to, like $8, $9, $10, $12 a foot. So, it can get extremely expensive. And a lot of places, especially in like grocery store chains, convenience stores, things like that, they'll do your sales average for the month based up on your square footage in the store. So, like, if you have 1,000 square foot storefront, you're doing, say, $10,000 in sales a month. You're doing $10 per square foot of the building or space you have allocated. So when you look at something like video games in particular, these nice, big, flashy, clunky, enormous collector's editions tend to take up an extraordinarily amount of space compared to something like PSA graded cards. And then if you get into, your raw, ungraded cards like these, they take up even less space than the graded ones. So when it comes to, your management of how much space you have, there becomes a point where the space you have isn't big enough to accommodate the collection or investing that you have in video games or, cars or things like that, even watches, that you're going to have to upgrade your space to somewhere bigger or get an extra space besides the one you currently have, which, that comes with costs. So whether it means you got to build a new building, rent a bigger space, you're going to have added security costs, your insurance cost is going to go up. All these things need to be taken into account when you're trying to figure out what sort of asset class you want to get into for, a bit of extra collecting or investing or whatever may have you. Next thing I'm going to go over, because it really fucking sucks, is most video games come in this, even if it's a waxy or glossy cardboard finished product, still at the end of the day cardboard. So cardboard tends to hold a lot of moisture. It sucks up moisture very easily, and it's prone to things like, mold, mildew, bad things like that. So if you don't have a properly, vented and climatized or climate regulated storage facility, you're also going to run into issues where your product is going to actually degrade over time, And, you know, if you get into bugs and things like that, then you're in a whole giant mess. Because instead of appreciating in value, your asset is actually going to be depreciating in value because the quality of it is going to be going down. When you have something like PSA or Beckett slabs, more so than the raw and graded cards, these things tend to be airtight. I found out from my basement flood, they're all, for the most part, waterproof. So, you know, you're eliminating that type of variable from the equation. So if there is, you know, a situation where you're gone away on vacation, or you can't access your facility if you don't store it in your own house, you can generally get by if there's a leak or, you know, massive weather, unfortunate things happening in your area, where damage that will happen to your video games might not necessarily happen to your PSA graded cards. The same thing comes for things like comic books, and if you have graded video games or things like that, but the problem comes back then to the space allocation that you're going to need to store these types of collectibles. One other thing I want to go over is the fact, for the most part, a lot of trading card games, or, you know, just trading cards in general, are for a younger audience. A lot of people in Yu-Gi-Oh! In particular, or even Pokemon, might not think of it as, you know, super young. You've got people who are in, like me, in your 30s, who grew up with this stuff as kids. But compared to something like, you know, watch collecting or comic book collecting or anything like that, you know, you've got an established hobby that's been around for decades, or, you know, with comic books about a century or a little bit more, compared to a lot of the younger trading card games, like even Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, anything like that. You got your Digimons and all the other fun stuff. You know, that is more so for a younger, quote-unquote, audience. Even the Magic people who were in their late teens, early 20s when Magic came out, they're still, for the most part, you know, they're not going to be in their 50s or 60s or 70s or anything like that. So it is generally a younger person's hobby, and therefore it has more room to grow as people, you know, age up. They get better jobs, they get more established, start a family, don't have as many, you know, bills to pay necessarily. You know, get your student loans paid off, get a decent car to drive around, get a house, all that fun stuff. So as their disposable income increases, as they pay down, you know, their student loans, different stuff like that we just spoke about, they're going to be spending more of that disposable income in a hobby or something that they grew up with. And that's been proven time and time again in things like comic books or sports cards, whatever may have you. So trading cards like, you know, your Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic, whatever else, is for the most part really nascent as a hobby, and has more potential to grow over the short, you know, 1 to 5 years, and long term, you know, your 6 to 20, 25 years. And I sincerely believe that, you know, these collectibles that we all grew up with as kids are not only going to hold their value for the most part, but they're also just going to keep going up in price, because as more people grow older and they get more disposable income, or, you know, you've got a big event like a 20th or 25th anniversary, and they get reminded of this stuff from when they were kids, they're going to be drawn back to the hobby. And as more people get drawn back to the hobby and stuff has already been bought up, those newcomers to the hobby, unfortunately, are going to have to pay a price premium compared to, you know, the people who were here first. So someone, you know, like old school collector or vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Geezy, who's been around for a very long time and already has an extraordinary position in a lot of these old sets, or, you know, tournament pack cards or show and jump prize cards. It's not very easy to replicate a collection like that going forward, as a lot of these items are already in long-term collectors' collections. And, you know, you got your flipper, investor, hyper people as well. But the cheap stuff, for the most part, has already been bought up. And as a result, it's going to push the prices ever up for anyone new trying to get into the hobby. So whether you like to admit it or not, the prices, for the most part, are going to keep going up as a result, because any newcomer who comes into the hobby is going to have to pay a premium price to attract, these collectors or even the investors who are willing to part ways with some of their collection. And that's one thing that people really need to understand, that you as a collector might not be happy that prices are going up, because it, causes you more financial difficulties to try and acquire new things for your collection. But that also means that there's other people in the hobby now, like yourselves, who wouldn't necessarily sell pieces of their own collection at the current market prices. So what that causes is people to need to pay more money to pry cards out of people's cold dead hands. So I'll get more into that into another video later on the week, but those are my 3 biggest reasons why I like collecting, trading cards, especially graded ones, compared to, the giant position video games that I do have. I've got like 3 different rooms full of this stuff. Comic books, I have, a bunch of stuff from when I was kids or a bit earlier. I'm not like giant into them. I don't collect, your graded gems from back in the early 30s or 40s or anything stupid like that, or anything super fancy like watches or cars or anything like that. So that's just my rationale. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. Either way, hit me up on Instagram at Parrot Party and let me know what you think, and have a good one.